We begin not with sudden change, but with unbroken rhythm. Feel the immense, quiet, monolithic weight of the Atlantic coast settle around you. We are standing at Etherid Point, perched on the furthest, granite-ribbed edge of Mystic Harbor, where the immense, ancient land gives way to the deep, endless, and cold mystery of the sea. Our vantage point is the very heart of the quiet, dependable world. The lighthouse, the structure built of dense, locally quarried granite and fitted with iron forged decades ago, stands not merely as a navigational aid, but as a silent, unwavering sentinel, a heavy anchor in the shifting, unpredictable sea of time and weather. This is the secluded world of Elias Hawthorne, the current 10th keeper of the light. His life is meticulously structured, not marked by hurried days or rushed minutes, but by the relentless, predictable cycles of the watch. He is a quiet custodian of safety, a man defined by profound solitude, unyielding precision, and a deep, intrinsic understanding of the coast's temper. Focus now on the central, unwavering constancy of the light itself. Deep within the polished copper dome, encased in the thick glass of the lantern room, the original clockwork mechanism, heavy, brass-fitted, and complex, still moves. It is designed with a profound simplicity that belies its task to ensure the slow, perfect, mathematically precise turning of the massive Fresnel lens. The mechanism creates a quiet, persistent, deep, measured pulse, entirely without haste, a steady heartbeat of the light. This sound, a low, constant vibration absorbed and muted by the thick glass and polished metal, is something Elias feels more than hears, a resonance that travels up the cold iron stairs and settles deep in the bone. It is the hour of the deep watch, perhaps 3 o'clock in the morning, traditionally the 4th watch, and the darkest hour before the first, false promise of dawn. The air is cold, thick with moisture drawn straight from the Atlantic, and smells faintly of salt ozone, and the highly refined mineral oil that powered the incandescent lamp of a past-century a ghost scent that clings persistently to the brass railings and the worn rope-wrapped handles. Elias is moving. His footsteps on the spiral iron staircase are slow, deliberate, and entirely without haste. Each placement of his worn leather sole, predictable and steady. The faint metallic complaint of the stairs is muffled by the thickness of the stone walls, echoing only slightly in the cavernous space as he ascends, an almost ceremonial climb. He arrives in the lamp room. The light, powerful and intensely focused by the elaborate structure of prisms and lenses, is already sweeping its beam across the dark expanse of the water, an immense, moving finger of white against the black canvas of the night. His first duty of the watch is a quiet, essential ritual of reverence and continuous maintenance. He retrieves his polishing cloth soft, fine linen kept in a specific, dry tin, its edges folded precisely. He begins his slow circuit around the enormous lens. He cleans the lens now, not because it is visibly dirty, but because the ritual of polishing is the ritual of the watch itself, a tactile, absolute connection to his purpose. He moves the cloth against the cold, smooth glass in slow, meticulous, circular motions, his breath held steady. Each pass removes invisible residue, minute motes of dust, and the microscopic salt film carried on the wind, ensuring the light's power remains undiminished and perfectly clear. This focused, repetitive movement embodies the rhythm of duty. The light beam sweeps past him every 30 seconds, briefly bathing his face and the glass in pure, blinding white light before moving on and plunging the room back into the soft, comforting shadow cast by the unlit side of the lens. He is alone, the only conscious soul in this silent, high place. Yet he is never lonely. He is part of a quiet, essential chain that stretches back over 100 years. He feels the deep security of this routine, the predictable, slow turning of the lens, assuring safety and marking the reliable presence of civilization in the vast, wild dark. With the lens polished, the oil reservoir levels checked and topped off, and the fragile mantle inspected for any microscopic structural flaw, Elias moves to his secondary duty, the logbook. This book is the official, physical, and profoundly heavy history of the light. A massive ledger bound in dark, worn leather, its corners scuffed smooth by time and hands. It rests on a small, worn, high desk bolted firmly into the stone wall of the watchroom, away from the immediate light of the lamp. It is the history of Etherid Point, recorded in the deliberate, distinct hands of 9 keepers before him, each entry a solidified moment of time. He selects his pen and dips the nib carefully into the inkwell. The slight liquid sounds a small, solitary intrusion into the quiet. He begins to record the conditions of the watch, the state of the sea numerical code, the precise height of the tide, the wind direction and speed, the precise measurement of visibility in any notable vessel, traffic, or atmospheric event. The steel pen nib moves across the thick, creamy paper with a quiet, careful friction. The script he employs is neat, precise, and entirely free of emotion, matching the required neutral tone of the official record. His entry for this watch reads, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Sea state 2. Wind 8 knots. Visibility 12 miles. All well. No traffic reported. His eyes, however, inevitably linger, drifting back over the previous, silent entries, reading the condensed histories of storms and calms. The logbook is far more than a simple operational document. It is the ledger of names, a quiet, sequential, and deeply personal history of human interaction, both successful and tragically failed with the deep water. He turns the pages with immense care, the paper heavy and slightly brittle, finding an entry from nearly 90 years ago describing a heavy gale and the immense mental and physical pressure placed on the keeper during that prolonged watch. Then, pages later, in a section dedicated to unusual events, he finds the sorrowful entry from 1912, written in a different, more panicked, hurried hand. The ink seemingly heavier and darker than the surrounding text, its strokes digging into the paper. April 2nd, 1912. Dense, unseasonal fog since 22 o'clock. The electric horn failed intermittently. Heard distress signal, but could not locate. At daybreak, wreckage of the freighter Theodosia, confirmed near Devil's Tooth Shoal. Keeper unable to assist. The simple, devastating finality of the sentence. Keeper unable to assist carries the weight of a ruined life, a profound regret, and a broken vow felt across the decades. These entries are the quiet, sobering reality of the light's duty. They mark the quiet successes, the thousands of safe passages, the nights passed without incident, the catastrophic tragedies, the lives lost, the times the light, though shining, could not penetrate the darkness or the fog deeply enough. Alias runs his finger over the heavy paper, feeling the quiet weight of shared, vicarious responsibility, a kinship with men he never met, but whose silent struggles he intuitively understands. Each entry is a single, slow breath in a long, unbroken watch, a small, essential part of the ongoing narrative of the coast. The sea itself keeps no records of its own. It is the keeper, confined to his solitary, high post, who maintains this quiet, meticulous history. He closes the book, the sound of the heavy leather covers settling against the wood a deep, final punctuation mark of the passing hour. He turns now, and for the first time in the watch, allows his gaze to fall fully upon the darkness outside. The light continues its rhythmic sweep. 1, 2, 3, and 4. An ancient, hypnotic cycle designed to assure absolute reliability. Tonight, the immense stillness holds a different, unsettling quality, an almost supernatural calm. The established routine is about to be profoundly disrupted, not by the violence of a storm, but by the insidious creeping of silence and density. A silent, profound change has begun to creep in from the sea. It is defog, or perhaps the most accurate maritime term, the sea fret. It is arriving slowly, quietly, but inexorably, rolling in like a massive, silver-white blanket dragged across the dark, cold water. The process is a gradual, chilling erasure. First, the distant, sharp pinpricks of the stars vanish, snuffed out one by one. Then, the definite, hard line of the horizon dissolves into an uncertain, formless gray. Soon, the very air pressing against the thick lamproom windows turns thick, wet, and utterly opaque, carrying a distinct, heavy scent of wet clay and distant ice. The light beam, which usually cuts a sharp, defined, brilliant path across the sea, now hits the sheer wall of moisture and immediately it loses its piercing focus, creating instead a vast, shimmering, internal domain, a shroud of silver mist that wraps the lighthouse itself in an impenetrable cocoon of light and water vapor. The keeper has entered the true world of isolation, where the visual landscape ceases to exist beyond a radius of 50 feet. The sound of the sea is immediately muffled, the entire horizon acoustically flattened. The rhythmic rush and pull of the waves is softened to a deep, resonant, continuous hum, a primordial drone. All visual definition is lost to the swirling whiteness outside the glass. Elias moves slowly to activate the fog signal, a low, mournful, heavy horn. It requires a sequence of precise valve adjustments, a ritual of pure machinery. It is designed to pierce the dense moisture with pure, immense sound, yet even its powerful, resonant blast seems to be swallowed up and absorbed just a few hundred yards from the tower. The sound is slow, sad, and entirely necessary, a deep sonic counterpoint to the visual void. The fog forces the keeper to rely not on sight, which is useless, but on sound, and on a deeper, more primal sense of placement and caution, relying on time and rhythm alone. As the mist thickens, Elias settles into his chair, performing the long, quiet duty of waiting. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the deep pulse of the horn resonate in his chest, feeling the thick, unyielding tower stand firm against the soft, cool chaos outside. He watches the moisture swirl, a mesmerizing slow dance of suspended particles and refracted light, knowing that somewhere out there unseen vessels are now navigating entirely blind, trusting only in the slow, rhythmic sound of his intermittent horn and the unwavering light that is now reduced to a muffled, glowing heart. The isolation is complete, a physical and psychological test of endurance. The deep, continuous, damp silence of the dense fog, punctuated only by the low, distant blast of the horn, is suddenly broken by a subtle, external sound. Utterly foreign to the established rhythms of the lighthouse, it appears in the deepest, most quiet core of the mist, at the precise point of greatest acoustic dampening. It is a bell. It is not the loud, clangorous, modern tone of a buoy bell, nor the chime of a routine vessel's watch bell, but an antique, heavy bronze ship's bell, deep and profoundly resonant, sounding as if it were chiming from the depths of the sea itself, vibrating through the water column. It is not tied to the foghorn's predictable rhythm, nor does it follow the inevitable pulse of the tide. It tolls randomly, quietly, and with unnerving clarity, a fragile sound floating mysteriously through the overwhelming dampness. It only rings when the fog is at its absolute thickest, when visibility is zero, and when the keeper is at his most alone. His senses honed to their absolute sharpest. Elias has heard it before, a faint, repeated rumor in the deep watches of the last few months, always dismissed in the morning as an auditory illusion. It is the anomaly, a recurring sound that should not exist, as no vassal wreck or navigational marker exists in that exact location. He checks his radar system. Static, white noise, and no contacts. He checks the older, sonic directional equipment. Nothing concrete, only feedback from the massive horn. The sound is a quiet ghost note in the acoustic void, seeming to originate from the precise location of the dangerous, unlighted Devil's Tooth Shoal, a treacherous patch of submerged rocks, known for decades of sudden, violent shipwrecks. He closes his eyes and listens again, his training allowing him to filter out the storm's noise. The sound is slow, melodic, and profoundly sad. A slow, continuous mourning, always chiming in groups of three. The mystery transforms from a simple curiosity into a quiet, insistent compulsion. It is the first tangible clue in a long, quiet mystery, a whisper from the deep time of the harbor that only the keeper, cocooned in the deepest mist, is meant to hear. He feels an unexpected, quiet pull, a sense of duty not just to the immediate safety of the living, but to the unquiet past, to a silence that demands recognition. His logical, engineering training insists on dismissing it as atmospheric refraction. Yet his deeper instinct, the inherent, isolated wisdom of the keeper, tells him it is real, constant, and intentional. He considers the legend of the shoal that it consumes ships and refuses to release their remnants. He knows that he must find the source of the persistent, rhythmic tolling that defies all logic in every chart. The sound is a disruption of his perfect, mechanical order, and therefore an existential threat to the light's integrity. The phantom bells, quiet, insistent tolling, which continued for a long, rhythmic 15 minutes before disappearing again into the fog, finally focuses Elias's attention away from the sea and sharply inward, toward the very stone foundation beneath his feet. He realizes the immediate answer may not be on the unpredictable water, but within the light's physical, immutable history. He descends now, back down the iron spiral, his feet seeking the familiar, rhythmic feel of the cold, damp stone of the foundation. The descent is long, and the temperature drops noticeably with every revolution. The base of the lighthouse is a thick, circular room rarely used except for storage, perpetually cool, and smelling purely of damp mortar and the ancient salt that has penetrated the granite decades ago. The sound of the sea is now a deep, muffled, profound rumble, felt more as a pressure on the ears and chest than as a distinct sound. Elias remembers a faint, archived architectural drawing he once studied, a highly detailed blueprint from the original build, which showed a minor, unusual discrepancy in the foundation plan near the north-facing wall. This area was labeled vaguely as a service access point. He moves his handheld lantern beam slowly, meticulously, across the rough-cut granite blocks that form the tower's base. The granite is unforgiving, textured, and heavy, but the beam catches a subtle seam, a line where the original masons sealed a specific block, not with the surrounding gray mortar, but with a different, slightly darker, resinous compound. It is a large, square stone, perfectly fitted. Its edge is almost invisible, but clearly installed after the main, continuous construction of the tower. This block looks impossibly heavy, immovable, yet strangely distinct in its composition. Elias kneels, his movements slow, careful, and deliberate, driven by a powerful, quiet hunch. His hand runs slowly over the cold, rough surface, tracing the lines of the rock, seeking the hidden mechanism that Silas must have engineered and intended as his final legacy. He finds a slight depression near the corner, a finger-sized pressure point, a lever worn smooth by time and perhaps the infrequent, careful touch of previous, silent keepers who had kept the secret. He presses the spot with his thumb. The mechanism moves with a dry, gravelly friction, the sound of old metal hinges and dry stone yielding after decades of stillness. The square stone block tilts inward slowly and silently, creating a draft of stale air, revealing a small, dark, recessed cavity. Inside, protected tightly by stiff, brittle oilskin that resists the cold and moisture, is a small, heavy journal bound in faded red leather and an antique, thick brass key of a complex, unfamiliar design. The discovery chills him, not with fear, but with the profound shock of shared destiny and intergenerational responsibility. Elias carefully carries the journal and the key back up the spiral stairs, to the warmth of the small living quarters adjacent to the tower, away from the constant, turning light. He lights a small oil lamp, giving the room a soft, steady glow that contrasts with the rhythmic sweep of the primary beam. The journal belongs to the first keeper, Silas Merritt, whose term ended abruptly and mysteriously in the severe winter of 1891. Elias gently unrolls the brittle oil. The parchment inside smells intensely of deep earth, static moisture, salt, and immense, compressed time. He opens the book slowly, his fingers tracing the worn, brittle paper. The early entries mirror his own: routine, weather, provisioning logs, duty, written in a disciplined, elegant, steady hand. But the later pages, dating to the last few months of Silas's life, are written with a rising, frantic, yet still controlled intensity. The script is smaller, more compressed, the spacing tighter, dedicated entirely to describing the sound, the bell, and the duty. Silas meticulously documents the specific rare atmospheric conditions, noting with precision that the bell only appeared when the atmospheric conditions, the exact temperature, barometric pressure, and humidity, were identical to the night of a specific devastating tragedy. The loss of the small local clipper named the Vigilance. Silas wrote that the ship's captain, driven by greed for a rumored secret cargo of gold and a stubborn pride, had ignored the light's warnings and perished on the shoals during a sudden, thick fog. The last legible entry, dated 2 days before Silas himself disappeared, is nearly frantic, filled with geometric sketches of sound wave patterns. But the final, single phrase stands out, written in thick, heavy, almost carved ink, gouging the paper. The light failed them in that sudden, consuming dark. I made the first light vow. I swore to watch for the bell, and I will never fail again. Ilias realizes his mystery is not a random phenomenon. It is a generational duty, a silent hand reaching out from the past. Silas created the secret chamber not to hide a treasure, but to pass on a warning, a piece of quiet, critical, psychic knowledge, tied to the rhythm of the harbor's deepest dangers. The phantom bell is not a random ghost. It is the silent, rhythmic assertion of Silas's unending, restless watch. Ilias knows he must now leave the quiet, protective safety of the tower and seek out the terrestrial knowledge, the history hidden in the forgotten, dusty corners of the town itself to understand the full scope of Silas's profound vow. The brass key remains a mystery, waiting for the right lock. The morning after the discovery, the deep, impenetrable fog still lingers stubbornly, its cold density refusing to burn off, transforming the small fishing port of Mystic Harbor into a place of muffled whispers and indistinct, uncertain forms. Ilias makes the rare trip ashore, crossing the causeway and leaving his trusted, elderly, but sharp-eyed assistant, Mr. Jensen, to mind the light in the lock. The trip is a stark contrast to the tower's profound solitude. He seeks out the oldest, voicest aging fishermen who spend their mornings mending nets and their afternoons mending memories near the quietest, most sheltered sections of the wharf. He finds them in a small, weathered shaka Notting house, where the air is thick with the pervasive, historic scent of old, tarred wood, brine, and drying cod. He introduces the name, the Vigilance, pronouncing the syllables slowly, distinctly, and watches the immediate, subtle shift in their weathered faces. The fishermen are hesitant, their gaze shifting towards the swirling white harbor. They speak in low, rhythmic, almost chanting tones, sharing only fragmented, reluctant pieces of the ancient tales of a captain driven by an unnatural greed for a rumored secret cargo of Peruvian gold, a stubborn ship, and a fateful, arrogant refusal to wait out a sudden, dangerous mist near the shoals, insisting on navigating through the blinding fog. One old man, the oldest of the group, his face a map of sun and wind, his voice a gravelly whisper, finally speaks of his own grandfather, speaking of Keeper Silas, and the disturbing, persistent rumor that Silas lost his mind in the isolation of the fog, claiming he could hear the lost ships he could no longer see, the bells of their final moments tolling only for him. They said Silas's soul couldn't leave the light. Not even after he left the light, the old man says, his voice a quiet, slow drone. He watches the rock, not the ships. The slow, rhythmic movement of their hands on the nets continues, a tangible, physical connection to the harbor's long, quiet, unwritten past. Elias realizes that the harbor doesn't truly forget its dead. It just folds their stories into the general background hum, a kind of cultural white noise that only those who listen closely and with patience, seeking the rhythm within the chaos, can decipher. He leaves the harbor with a confirmed sense that the mystery is real and profoundly anchored in the deep, violent history of Etherid Point. Elias returns to Etherid Point just as the rhythmic beat of the sea intensifies dramatically. The lingering, pervasive fog has been joined by a growing, tangible, immense threat, a powerful nor'easter sweeping rapidly down the coast, heralded by a sudden drop in barometric pressure. The air is heavy, charged with ozone, and the low, constant hum of the tide is quickly escalating into the profound, loud roar of crashing waves. The light must now face its true, elemental, primal challenge. Elias prepares the lamp room with intense, focused concentration. The massive glass lens must be checked for vibration, the clockwork mechanism inspected for any instability, and the weather seals around the windows secured. He feels the entire stone structure beginning to vibrate subtly but persistently under the immense, crushing, rhythmic pressure of the wind and wave impact. The sudden, immense pressure of the wind hitting the glass is punctuated by the massive, resonant crash of a wave against the granite base of the tower, a sound of violent, liquid thunder. His movements are now quicker, but still rhythmic, driven by adrenaline but guided by decades of methodical, ingrained training. He logs the change. 19 o'clock. Sea state 6. Wind shifting NNW, rapidly increasing to gale force. Gusting 250 knots. Gale force expected by 21 o'clock. Light holding true. Structural integrity nominal. Switching 2.0 power suit. The modern power grid, which supplies the high-powered main lamp and radio, begins to flicker erratically, unreliable in the face of nature's immense, uncontrolled power. The deep, heavy sound of the auxiliary diesel generator kicks in, loud, metallic, and grinding, a jarring, temporary sound against the natural chaos. Elias watches the storm rage, the light beam struggling desperately against the dense, horizontal rain and spray. He knows that in a storm of this magnitude, the modern systems, the GPS, the sonar, the radio can all fail utterly, leaving vessels reliant entirely on the rhythmic sweep of his light. The keeper's duty becomes primal, to maintain the steady, internal heartbeat of the light against the chaotic, deafening rhythm of the storm. A fight between man-made order and the wild, destructive beauty of natural oblivion. The storm reaches its violent, deafening, chaotic peak just after midnight. The main power fails utterly, severing the light's connection to the terrestrial grid. The generator sputters violently, strains under the immense load of the lamp. The horn and then dies with a final metallic groan, plunging the light into darkness for a terrifying quiet moment before the old heavy battery backup reluctantly kicks in. The light returns, but it is weak, struggling, giving only a faint pulse to the lamp. The rhythmic sweep of the immense beam slows, heavy and laborious, visibly impeded by the failing battery reserve. It is now, in the moment of highest peril, that Elias hears a new, urgent distress signella. Desperate, modern radio call from a small, local fishing vessel, the Maria, caught too close to the shoals. The captain is disoriented. His GPS is dead due to the electrical surge, and he is steering directly toward the treacherous rock formation known as Devil's Tooth. Elias cannot use the radio to respond. His power reserves are too low, and the communication equipment is failing. His light is too weak to penetrate the dense, wind-whipped rain and spray to guide them visually. The fate of the small vessel hangs suspended in the dark. Suddenly, through the deafening, physical roar of the wind and the crashing water, he hears it, cutting through the chaos with impossible clarity. The phantom bell. The bell is pure, bronze, resonant, and seems to be coming directly from the danger zone. A specific, isolated point in the raging sea. It is ringing rapidly, urgently, not with a mournful slow toll, but a frantic, insistent rhythm of sharp warning, pulsing faster than any standard buoy. Elias realizes that Silas's vow was not just a historical recording. It was an intuitive alarm system tied to the deep-sea distress. The shoal was warning of its own hunger. He makes a critical, desperate decision, a choice between two forms of light, throwing the remaining precious battery power completely to the main, powerful horn sacrificing the failing lamp entirely. The horn blares out its deafening signal, a sound of immense, vibrating force, but he uses his body, leaning out into the storm, manually directing the blast away from the bell's sound. He signals away from the danger, using the bell as his silent, constant, absolute reference point. He is guiding a modern vessel using an ancestral, mystic warning, relying on a ghost to save a life, performing the exact duty that Silas failed to complete a century before. The agonizing decision, duty over logic, is complete. Elias holds the horn lever, his arms shaking, his body battered by the immense force of the wind. Until he hears the radio static finally fade into silence, the fishing vessel, the Maria, has managed to change course, guided by the nun sound of the bell and the fierce countersignal of the horn. The silence that follows is not a peaceful silence, but the exhausted, ringing silence of spent, immediate energy and absolute physical drain. The intense, frantic ringing of the bell ceases, absorbed back into the storm's noise. As the early morning light slowly begins to filter through the diminishing, sputtering rain, Elias can just make out the small fishing vessel, making it slow, safe, uncertain passage back toward the harbor entrance. The rescue was successful, performed not by modern technology or simple calculation, but by ancestral intuition and the keeper's absolute trust in a phantom guide. The cost of the lighthouse failure had been averted by the keeper's willingness to listen to the inexplicable. Elias returns to the lamp room, collapsing into the watch chair. The slow, rhythmic pulse of the clockwork mechanism starts up again as the generator sputters back to life, its internal combustion a sound of profound relief. He opens Silas's journal again, reviewing the last, frantic entry. He understands now, with an undeniable clarity. Silas's duty was not merely to maintain the light, but to become the warning. His quiet, decades-long obsession and guilt transformed into a quiet, protective, localized presence, tied forever to the fatal fog and the imminent danger of the shoals. The phantom bell was not a random ghost. It was the echo of a keeper's failure transformed into a permanent guidepost, a rhythmic warning only audible to the one who shares his burden. The keeper bound to the rock and the glass, Elias realizes his watch is not just a job, a salary, or a technical function. It is the continuation of an eternal commitment, a quiet duty passed down through the very granite stone of the tower. He is now, inextricably, part of the sea's ancient, rhythmic warning system. The day after the storm is a long, slow, profound ritual of restoration. The generator needs significant repair, the battery banks need charging, and the entire copper dome and lantern glass is heavily coated in salt and grime. Elias moves with a profound sense of peace, his physical rhythm restored by the sheer necessity of the work, his purpose clarified by the near. There is no room for reflection, only labor. He focuses on the physical work, the quiet, therapeutic act of mending the chain of duty. He meticulously cleans the massive lens again, his soft cloth erasing the heavy smudges of the storm, returning the glass to its perfect, smooth transparency. The rhythmic movement of the cloth is now a sound of profound satisfaction, an act of purifying the light itself. He works slowly on the intricate clockwork mechanism, oiling the fine brass gears with a light, precise touch, ensuring the rhythmic sweep will remain flawless and unwavering for the next century. Every turn of the wrench, every wipe of the cloth, is a deliberate step in reinforcing the light's dependability. He sees the light tower now not merely as a utilitarian building, but as a quiet, physical embodiment of a spiritual vow. He gently polishes the heavy brass key that unlocked Silas's secret, a small, warm weight in his hand, a tangible connection to his predecessor. He decides not to seal the journal back into the stone cavity. Instead, he places it carefully in the main logbook cabinet, treating it as a new, permanent reference for all future keepers. Not a secret to be guarded, but a truth of the harbor to be understood, a necessary piece of operational spiritual lore. He has accepted his place in the long, quiet line of keepers, a chain of duty stretching back to the earliest whisper of the light. His work is the slow, deliberate work of a lifetime, ensuring the light endures perfectly for the next watch and the next. The storm demanded effort. The aftermath requires patience and methodical grace. The week has passed. The rhythm of the light is fully restored. Its perfect, mechanical, and quiet cadence, a comforting metronome against the silence. The sea, once a thrashing beast, has settled into its quiet, predictable movement. Its deep blues have returned. A vast, calm expanse. The sky is clear, washed clean by the storm, and at night the stars are brilliant, 1,000 tiny, constant lights overseen by the one, steady, sweeping beam of Etherid Point. I'm standing in the lamp room now, looking out across the water. The fog is gone, the storm a remote, respected memory. The sea is calm, its vastness now comforting, no longer threatening. It's time to make my final entry for the week in the logbook. My script feels different now, precise, but holding a quiet confidence that was hard-won in the heart of the chaos. I dipped a pen and write. Sea state 1. Wind W, 5 knots. Visibility, perfect. 2 horizon line. All well. Duty fulfilled. The watch stands ready. There's a quiet finality as I close the heavy cover of the book, an acceptance of this continuous cycle of storm and calm, of duty and rest. I sit in my chair, the one worn smooth by keepers before me. I can feel the deep, soft resonance of the turning mechanism in the floorboards, a hum that syncs with the low, rhythmic flow of the ocean tide. It's a pulse, a heartbeat. The towers, the seas, my own, they all beat as one. I look out as the beam sweeps over the dark water. It illuminates a distant fishing boat, a small silhouette making its slow, safe return to Mystic Harbor. They see the light. They trust Italiano. In that flash of brilliant white, I see it too. This light is not just a warning against the rocks. It's a promise. It's an assurance that order will prevail over chaos, that there is a steady hand in the darkness. This is what it means to be the keeper, to be the quiet, necessary connection between a deep, storied past and the immediate safety of the present. I am the custodian of an eternal vow, a promise made of light and stone. I close my eyes, allowing the rhythmic, lulling pulse of the light to fill my mind. It's a profound, deep rest that comes from knowing the watch is eternal, and it is shared with the keepers who came before, and with the light itself. I am ready for the night to pass. I am ready for the dawn to break, and I am ready for the light to shine, steadily, endlessly, in this quiet, profound solitude of the sea. Thank you for joining me on this watch. If you found a moment of peace here, consider subscribing and joining our small community. Until the next tide, stay safe. We begin our slow, gentle descent, following the very first whispers of the Appalachian Fog. Close your eyes now and feel the cool, damp breath of the mist on your skin, a fine, invisible condensation of ancient history. This fog is not merely moisture. It is a shroud woven from hundreds of millions of years of history, hanging over mountains whose creation predates the first true land animals. Breathe deeply now and allow the immense, quiet weight of geological time to settle upon you, pulling you down into a state of profound, natural rest. We travel back, not decades, not centuries, but hundreds of millions of years, to the very moment these quiet, enduring mountains first stirred from the sea. Imagine a world profoundly different, where the continents were converging, a single, colossal landmass we call Pangea. To the east, where the vast, blue stillness of the Atlantic Ocean will one day lie. There was only a colossal, patient crunching zona collision of unimaginable, quiet force. The story of the Appalachians is the story of 3 great mountain-building events, 3 slow-motion, cosmic collisions, known as orogenies. Each one was a slow, quiet, unimaginable grinding of the Earth's crust, a testament to the planet's geological patience. This motion is measured not in the speed of wind, but in millimeters per year, a silent, deep, enduring crawl that folds rock as icily as cloth. The first great pulse of creation occurred over 480 million years ago. Feel the quiet pressure building deep beneath the surface, the slow folding of sedimentary layers laid down eons before in forgotten oceans. The sound of this creation was not a sudden explosion. It was the slow, continuous, resonant moan of compressed stone, felt only by the deep core of the earth itself. A sound muffled by time but still echoing in the dentist granite. But mountains are also, quietly, continuously unmade. As soon as the peaks emerged, the tireless, silent work of erosion began. Picture the sun's slow, powerful heat cracking the rock face, the water freezing in quiet fissures to split the stone apart, particle by particle. This erosion is the second great, quiet process that defines the Appalachians. For hundreds of millions of years, rain, rivers, and ice have been quietly wearing down these giants, softening their sharp, young edges, transforming them from towering, jagged peaks into the rolling, ancient, humped ridges. We know today the Alleghenian orogeny, the final great collision, up in it about 270 million years ago. This final, slow pressure pushed the rocks eastward, folding and stacking them like an immense, quiet blanket of stone, creating the famous valley and ridge province of quiet, repeating sequence of long, parallel crests and troughs. The Blue Ridge, the quiet spine of the range, is composed of the hardest, most resilient metamorphic rocks, granite and ice. They are the quiet, unyielding core, the bones that survived the long, relentless chewing of erosion. The Appalachians are quiet giants because their violence has settled into calm. They are the quiet elders of the world's mountain ranges, leaving only the profound wisdom of their ancient heart. Now, let's drift back together, carried by the mountains into the next great age. We're traveling into the profound silence of the Carboniferous era. Just imagine it, about 300 million years ago. Feel the intense heat, the immense, dripping humidity that hangs in the air. The peaks of the Appalachians are high, still young and jagged, but down below, the valleys are vast, shallow, teeming swamps. This is the era of the Carboniferous forest, a quiet, almost alien ecosystem where the very air was heavy with moisture and life. Picture it with me. Immense ferns with fronds the size of small trees, towering lycopod trees, not like any trees we know today, stretching towards a sky thick with oxygen. They grow and they fall in a quiet, relentless cycle that seems to have no end. The sound here isn't a roar or a shout. It's the low, rhythmic gurgle of ancient swamps. It's the steady plop of decaying leaves and branches falling into the black, still water. And in the distance, the heavy asterisk, thwomp asterisk, of unseen, large, damped creatures, moving slowly through the dense undergrowth. There's no urgency here, no rush. There is only the slow, predictable rhythm of growth and decay, a planetary metabolism at its slowest and most profound. And all this decaying material, this endless cycle of life and death, is the secret hidden within the mountains, compressed under millions of years of the mountain's own runoff and the immense weight of deep time. This organic matter slowly transformed into the vast, black reserves of Appalachian coal. The coal seams, buried deep within these mountains, are the solidified memories of that ancient, silent forest. They are carbonized sunlight and moisture, a dark testament to the quiet power of life and decay. Feel that profound, soothing silence. This is a world without human consciousness, a world dominated only by the slow, predictable rhythms of geology. It's a silence that stretches for eons. The long, heavy silence of the Permian period followed this era. This was a quiet age of drying and hardening. The swamps began to recede, and the immense pressure continued to compact the mountain's treasures, turning forests into stone. Through all of this, the rivers continued their patient work, carving the deep, meandering gorges that we see today. If you've ever been to the southern Appalachians and seen that rich, red earth, you're looking at a message from this time. That color comes from the slow, quiet oxidation of Arna, rust-colored fingerprint of deep time, revealed by erosion. The mountain was patiently preparing its soil, its water, and its hidden energy for the new life that would eventually find its way to this ancient, misty sanctuary. It's a story of incredible patience, written in stone and soil, waiting for us to learn how to read it. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more explorations into our world's deep past. Welcome back to our journey through the deep history of the Appalachians. For millions of years, these mountains stood in geological silence, shaped only by wind and water. Then, around 16,000 years ago, that silence was broken, not with a roar, but with a whisper. The first Pepus arrived. These were the Paleo-Indians, hunter-gatherers, who slipped into the Appalachian valleys with a quiet reverence. Imagine them, not as conquerors, but as masters of adaptation, moving with the slow, deliberate rhythm of the land itself. They were a fleeting presence in a vast, ancient forest, their lives intertwined with the great beasts of the Ice Age. Picture the hunter, senses alive, moving like a shadow across the landscape just beginning to thaw. They weren't just passing through. They were reading the story of the earth, one footprint, one broken twig at a time. Their focus was absolute, their movements a dance with the natural world. As the great ice sheets retreated and a new warmth crept into the air, these early people didn't leave. Instead, they moved higher, deeper into the heart of the mountains. Over thousands of years, their cultures evolved, becoming the archaic, and later the woodland peoples. Their lives became more rooted, more intimately connected to these specific slopes and valleys. They were learning the patient secrets of the forest, understanding its subtle, cyclical language. They knew the precise moment a chestnut was ready to fall, the hidden grove where berries grew thickest, and the secret paths the deer followed at dawn. Their existence was a masterclass in sustainability, a quiet harmony with the seasons. The mountains weren't just a place to live. They became a living, breathing entity, an immense, sacred home that provided everything they needed. This deep connection was spiritual, woven into the very fabric of their being. Have you ever seen that beautiful, soft haze that often blankets the Appalachian peaks? That iconic blue veil of mist isn't just weather, it's the subtle, collective exhalation of the forest, itself a mix of moisture and organic compounds, released by the dense canopy of trees. To the Cherokee, who descended from these early peoples, this wasn't just fog. It was something sacred. They called it the asterisk. Shakanage asterisk. The land of the blue smoke. They saw it as the visible, shimmering breath of the earth rising towards the heavens. And from this deep, spiritual observation, the Great Smoky Mountains earned their name. The lives of these first peoples were a study in balance, lived entirely within the ecological limits of the ancient forest. If you listen closely, with your imagination, you can almost hear the echoes of their distant existence. The soft crackle of a cooking fire on a cool evening. The rhythmic asterisk thud dash thud dash thud asterisk of a stone pestle grinding corn into meal. The gentle, muffled beat of a drum carrying a prayer across a still, quiet valley, its sound absorbed by the ancient trees. They were the ones who first established the quiet pathways through the mountains. The trails they walked, following the contours of the land, would be worn deeper by countless generations to come, eventually becoming the hiking trails many of us know and love today. In these first peoples, the mountains had found their first true stewards, people whose very presence was not an imposition, but a quiet, rhythmic dance with the land. Their legacy isn't carved in stone monuments. It's written in the subtle harmony between humanity and wilderness, a story that still whispers through the valleys of the blue smoke. Thanks for joining me on this part of our exploration. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more journeys into the deep past. We've got so much more to uncover together. See you next time. The quiet footsteps of the first nomads deepened into the settled rhythm of the Cherokee Nation. Imagine the heartland, the high, misty peaks, and the rich, flowing river valleys of the southern Appalachians. The Cherokee did not merely reside here. They were an extension of the deep roots of the mountains. Their lives were governed by the slow, ancient pulse of kinship and community. Their villages, built along the rivers, were quiet centers of a sophisticated society, organized around the enduring wisdom of the clan system. The sound of this life was the quiet, rhythmic splash of the river canoe paddle, the focused hum of women weaving baskets and preparing clay, and the deeply resonant silence of the council house, where decisions were made with immense, collective patience and respect for long-term survival. The council house was the still, quiet center of their world. Its fire kept perpetually burning, a spiritual anchor. The Cherokee treated the peaks, especially the sacred balsams and smokies, not as land to be owned, but as a temple to be honored, believing the high ground held the spirits of the ancestors. Their ancient paths, often following the high, dry ridgelines, were lines of quiet communication, connecting distant towns across hundreds of miles of deep forest. The quiet, enduring challenge of their time was maintaining the balanced fire of their culture burning brightly against the vast, encompassing silence of the wilderness. They cultivated their corn, squash, and beans using patient, sustainable methods, and they mastered the subtle, quiet language of the forest hunt, moving with a reverence that ensured the bounty would return. This era represents the zenith of human mountain harmony, a time when the deepest secrets of the forest were known and respected. But the wind now began to carry faint, disturbing new whispers from the east, carried over the furthest ranges to echoes of a different, more demanding culture, one that spoke of borders and fences. The quiet era of pure indigenous stewardship began to yield to the shadow of the ridge runner. Around the mid-18th century, the first European explorers and hunters penetrated the mountain interior, driven by the lure of the wilderness and the profit of the fur trade. They were the long hunters, solitary, hardy men who disappeared into the vast wilderness for months, sometimes years. Motivated by the lucrative demand for furs and pelts back on the coast, they followed the ancient Cherokee paths, moving with a forced, intense quiet. There lives a constant study in stealth and survival, always listening for danger. Imagine a single figure, dressed in deerskin, sleeping under a rock overhang, the quiet loneliness of the vast forest pressing in. His only companion, the distant, wild call of a bobcat. Their motivation was fundamentally different from the people who created the paths. They saw the land not as a sacred resource to be shared, but as a commodity to be extracted, a supply house for European markets. The quiet of the forest was now being invaded by a new unsettling sound, the muffled crack of a European rifle, often followed by a deep, profound silence where only the echo remained, a silence that signaled the end of a mountain creature's life. These long hunters brought back stories of unimaginable wealth in game and timber, transforming the mountain barrier from an obstacle into a quietly desired frontier. They were the harbingers of change, their presence marking the beginning of the quiet, brutal conflict over land ownership. The subtle, shared boundary between the Cherokee hunting grounds and the colonial ambitions was being erased by lines drawn on maps in distant cities. Small, violent skirmishes flared, often hidden from the history books, existing only as quiet, fearful whispers passed down in mountain families. The shadow of colonial ambition was creeping over the misty slopes, signifying that the time of uninterrupted quiet was nearing its end. Following the long hunters came the steady, determined flood of pioneers, primarily Scots-Irish and German families, in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. They moved through the narrow passages, seeking the fertile river bottoms and deep, sheltered coves. Their lives were defined by a relentless, quiet struggle for survival against the immense forces of nature. Imagine the scene. A small, vulnerable family facing a wall of ancient, towering forest. The air thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. The first sound of their permanent settlement was the heavy thwack of the axe, slowly and methodically clearing the dense trees. This process was a loud, deliberate break in the forest's deep silence, yet it was a slow rhythm of its own. The scrape of the adze shaping the timber, the grunt of men lifting the massive logs, the detailed process of notching the corners to fit perfectly. But soon, the isolation settled back in, turning each small valley into a self-contained, quiet world. The long, winding ridgelines enforced deep self-reliance, and profound kinship. Neighbors were often family, and they needed each other to survive the harsh winters. The settlers developed a profound, practical wisdom, learning to extract iron from the quiet earth, to tap the maple trees for sugar, and to rely on their own hands for everything from farming to medicine. The quiet sound of the forge, the lowing of cattle, the soft, repetitive rhythm of the spinning wheel, and the churn of butter filled the small clearings. Their relationship with the land was complex. They loved its challenge and beauty, yet they sought to tame it, a stark contrast to the Cherokee's stewardship. This quiet persistence forged the classic Appalachian character. Fiercely independent, deeply loyal, and inherently suspicious of outside authority. The frontier was fading, turning into a settled, difficult homeland, defined by the quiet endurance of its hardworking people. As the clearings solidified into enduring communities, a unique, resilient culture took root, nourished by isolation and the profound need for communal solace. This culture was rooted in two quiet, vital forces: faith and folk tradition. Imagine a Saturday night in a deep hollow, the rhythmic driving sound of the fiddle, the energetic strumming of the banjo, filling the air with melodies carried across the ocean from Scotland and Ireland, now adapted to the mountain pulse. The music was a quiet, passionate blend of ballads and rhythms, telling stories of hardship, love, and the quiet struggles of daily life. Listen closely to the sound of the ballad's teah. Long, slow, mournful tales, perfectly paced for an evening by the fire. On Sundays, the quiet turned to the profound fervor of the Great Awakening. Imagine a camp meeting in a deep forest clearing, illuminated by firelight, the sound of the preacher's voice rising and falling, echoing across the silent trees. It was a raw, emotional, deeply personal faith, free of formality, where the shared experience of the divine was paramount. The isolation also preserved a rich tradition of storytelling and folklore. Grandmothers, the granny women, held the quiet knowledge of the forest's medicinal secrets, passing down remedies that combined ancient European herbology with Native American wisdom. They were the quiet healers, the keepers of local lore and the subtle magic of the mountains. The Appalachian dialect itself evolved into a quiet, linguistic time capsule, preserving language patterns from centuries past in its unique phrasing and rhythm. This era was the quiet zenith of mountain autonomy, where the rhythms of life were dictated entirely by the seasons and the enduring presence of the ancient stone. The eruption of the American Civil War in the 1860s brought a profound, tragic violence to the quiet isolation of the Appalachians. The mountains, far from the grand battlefields, became a landscape of deeply personal and internal conflict. Imagine the scene: families and neighbors, united by generations of kinship, now violently divided by competing loyalties, brother against brother, cove against cove. The Appalachian Range became a ridge of division. Many mountain people were loyal to the Union, skeptical of the slaveholding elite. Others were fiercely dedicated to the Confederacy. The war in the mountains was a brutal, quiet struggle of guerrilla warfare. Raids, ambushes, and small, bloody skirmishes that often happened under the cover of the dense fog. Neighbors fought neighbors in the dark, silent depths of the coves, motivated by old grudges as much as political ideology. The sound of the war was not the grand roar of cannon, but the sudden, terrible crack of a rifle in a secluded valley, followed by a profound, fearful silence, where everyone waited to see who had fallen. The women, left alone to manage the farms, faced quiet, continuous hardship, scarcity, fear, and the constant threat of confiscation or raid. They learned to hide livestock and valuable stores in the deepest, quietest sections of the woods, relying on their profound knowledge of the land to survive. The war left a deep, quiet scar on the mountain psyche, fostering a long-lasting suspicion of outsiders, government, and even neighbors, renewing the fierce commitment to self. When the war finally ended, the physical mountains remained, but the emotional landscape was profoundly fragmented. The peace that returned was not the quiet calm of the pre-war era, but a heavy, uneasy silence, a period of mourning and slow, quiet reconstruction that tested the very definition of resilience. As the nation industrialized in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the vast, quiet resources hidden within the Appalachian folds became an irresistible magnet for outside capital. This was the era of the Great Exploitation, a noisy, dramatic break with the mountains' long, quiet history. Imagine the sudden, deafening sound of the train whistle echoing through the once silent valleys, their arrival of the railroad, an invasive artery built to drain the mountains of their wealth. Logging companies moved in, replacing the quiet, selective harvest of the pioneer with the loud, continuous roar of the steam-powered saw and the crash of giant trees falling. Vast tracts of ancient, virgin timber were rapidly stripped away, leaving desolate, scarred hillsides vulnerable to erosion. Simultaneously, the demand for Appalachian coal exploded. Quiet, small-town life was replaced by the cramped, noisy, temporary world of the coal camp. Generations of mountain men were forced into the dark, dangerous, rhythmic labor of the deep mines. Listen to the sound of the mine shaft. The constant drip, drip, drip of water. The rhythmic clang of the pickaxe, and the low, collective cough of the trapped dust. The mountains gave up their stored sunlight, their black gold, at a profound human cost. The quiet, self-sufficient culture was shattered, replaced by the loud, insecure rhythm of the company payroll. Clear mountain streams became choked with slag, and the air was thick with the dust of industry. The mountains were tested not by nature, but by the relentless, organized ambition of human industry, leaving behind a legacy of both energy and quiet, persistent poverty. In the face of the industrial noise that roared through the valleys, the deep, ancient soul of the Appalachians retreated into the quiet world of lore and legend. As the trains carried away the timber, the storytellers became the quiet keepers of the past. Imagine a dark, quiet night deep in a hollow, illuminated only by the flicker of a fire, where the generations gathered to hear the whispers of the extraordinary. This is where the old folk tale is endured. Stories of Haint's ghosts who walked the ridges, of mountain witches, and of the hidden powers residing in the deep coves. These were not mere entertainment. They were the mountain's way of teaching caution, of preserving respect for the wild, and of making sense of the incomprehensible. The ancient knowledge of the granny women evolved into a profound respect for mountain magic quiet. Practical spirituality were charms, rituals, and a deep, specific knowledge of herbs protected against misfortune and illness. They knew the quiet locations of the ginseng, the healing power of the bloodroot, and the soothing properties of the sassafras. The mountain people understood that power resided not in the loud machines, but in the quiet, hidden things, the specific root, the whispered incantation, the knowledge passed down from mother to daughter. The fog, the enduring character of the mountains, became a recurring figure in the lore, a mysterious, quiet shroud that could hide both danger and salvation. This era was one of deep, cultural preservation, ensuring that the unique, enduring soul of the mountain culture would not be completely lost to the rush of modernity, keeping its quiet flame alight through the darkest hours. The widespread devastation caused by the unchecked logging and mining provoked a powerful, quiet counter-reaction. The birth of the conservation movement. Imagine the sight of the scarred, eroded hillsides, once covered by ancient forest, now laid bare and silent. This devastation spurred quiet, determined action in the early 20th century to set aside and protect the highest, wildest, most biologically diverse sections. This was the vision that led to the creation of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Blue Ridge Parkway. This process, however, was not without its own quiet, personal tragedies. Land had to be purchased, often forcibly, from the mountain families who had lived for generations in the secluded valleys and coves that became the park's heartland. The families were moved out, and their homesteads, their fields, and their quiet way of life was slowly consumed by the returning forest. The sound of this era was the low, steady rumble of bulldozers clearing the land, followed by a profound, restorative silence as the national park took over, allowing nature's rhythm to reassert itself. The land was allowed to heal, the trees grew back, the streams began to clear, and the wildlife returned, moving with a quiet confidence back into their restored domain. The forest floor, once hard and beaten by industry, became soft and yielding again, muffling all sound. The Blue Ridge Parkway was a deliberate, quiet attempt to marry natural preservation with accessibility, creating a stunning, high-altitude scenic route that protected the mountain's beauty while ensuring the land was left to its own quiet devices. The Appalachian story transitioned from one of exploitation to one of stewardship and quiet appreciation, ensuring that the ancient rock, the dense forest, and the persistent fog would remain a sanctuary. We arrive now at the modern chapter of the Appalachian story, yet the constant presence of the Appalachian fog reminds us that the deep time of the mountains continues its quiet, unending rhythm. The mountains today are a complex landscape of contrasts. Preserved wilderness stands alongside areas of quiet, persistent economic challenge, a legacy of the industrial eras. But the unique Appalachian spirit, that fierce independence, that quiet resilience, that deep connection to family and place, even as the outside world, via high-speed internet and modern roads, finally penetrates every deep hollow. The music remains, evolved but still telling stories of the land, its rhythm rooted in the old ballads, The quiet wisdom of the mountain folk persists, now often expressed through new forms of craft, art, and conservation efforts. The mountains teach us the value of the slow view, of quiet waiting, and of the strength that comes from enduring. The fog, the gentle, constant moisture, still shrouds the highest peaks, creating the smoke that has defined the landscape for millennia. When you visit these mountains today, you are walking on the quiet, enduring scars of Pangaea's shore, tracing the long-forgotten paths of the Cherokee, and feeling the powerful, gentle presence of the ancient trees. The Appalachians are not loud, dramatic mountains, but mountains of deep, quiet wisdom. They teach us that endurance is measured in slow, rhythmic breaths, that destruction gives way to rebirth, and that time is the ultimate healer. Let the sound of the distant, soft hoot of the single owl and the muffled rush of the deep forest stream now carry you away, knowing that the mountains are still there, quietly holding their secrets, waiting patiently for the next slow turn of the earth. Feel the weight of the ancient stone lift from your mind now, and sink into a profound, peaceful rest guided by the eternal whispers of the Appalachian fog.